It's been 5 years since the undead menace first reared its ugly head. Millions of lives have been lost to the Pandora virus, and the crisis has shaken the most deeply held values and beliefs of our government, religion, and society. It all began in Blackwood City, a place whose name has become synonymous with terror. But even though the events of this once quiet town have changed our lives forever, what do we really know about its history? Join us as we explore what really happened at Blackwood City.
I'll never forget when the sirens started going off. High school radio saying something about people going crazy. That's when I looked at my Bubba and I says, "Bubba, we gotta get the hell out of Dodge." We was the last car to get out full of military to start their quarantine. I remember when we was all happy when Paragon moved in. They brought jobs and money. We thought it was great. That was a bunch of bullshit.
Now remember, nobody knew what was going on at the time. The rumors of dead bodies returning from the grave was considered nonsense. It was that way for almost the first full year of quarantine. But when the survivors in the quarantine zone started to organize, arm themselves, form militias to fight their way to freedom, that's when the politicians decided to take action.
They called it a surgical nuclear strike. There's nothing surgical about it. 10 kilotron nuke dropped right in the middle of the city.
But when it didn't go off, when it started leaking radiation into the city and the groundwater, causing all types of mutations in the zombies and the survivors, that's when the world really took notice.
Protests, sit-ins, self-immolation. Society was in chaos, and so was Blackwood City. Then, the world.
We don't know how the virus got out, but unfortunately it did. In a big way, a very big way.
The virus spread throughout the continental United States. Within a month, there were reports of infection on all 7 continents. Panic, fear, and so much death. But the hope for our future would come to us from the most unexpected place, Blackwood City.
You had every great mind in the world working on how to fix this, but it was our own Dr. Riker, hard at work back in the Blackwood City lab, who finally cracked that code. We're very proud of that.
Not only did he create a cure, he managed to somehow reach the outside world and smuggle the cure out. So yes, I'd say Dr. Riker is a hero. A real hero. It's just very unfortunate where that miracle cure ended up.
The cure was smuggled to an extreme right wing of the Russian military, and the world was faced with a stark choice. Accept a new world order or perish.
The world was in panic, and history has shown us fear always leads to violence and a loss of civil liberties. And the New World government was no different. Sure, they could get rid of this terrible epidemic, but there would be a price. And that price was the value of the individual, as was demonstrated with the lottery.
Well, the idea of the lottery was to keep a small population essentially infected with the Pandora virus by basically forcing innocent people into the original quarantine zone of Blackwood City. Now, the reasoning for this was to keep access to an active strain of the virus in the event of any future mutations or outbreaks, but that was clearly a farce, and there was no science to support that approach. It's likely the New World government wanted to keep the threat of Pandora in the minds of people. A frightened population is easily controlled, and what better way to frighten people than to hold exclusive rights to the most devastating virus in human history? Of course, the whole thing backfired, thank God.
After just one lottery, international outrage gave way to a resistance movement. A group of former NATO allies who challenged the stranglehold of the New World government.
We were gearing up for World War III. We really were. And just like that, seemingly overnight, it was over. The Russians backed down.
The nightmare seemed to be over. And with the world returning to normal, Paragon Industries decided to open the doors to its Blackwood City facility once again. An act that would lead to one last tragedy.
Look, Pandora was a freak accident that had nothing to do with our research efforts. We've maintained that for 5 long and trying years, and every court of law has agreed that we were not negligent in our handling of the Pandora crisis. That being said, we wanted to do good by all of those people harmed by this terrible virus. And that is really what the reopening of Blackwood Labs was all about.
A noble gesture or a greedy cash grab? Congress approved direct payment of hundreds of millions of dollars in government subsidies to Paragon. The company would undertake a massive effort to reverse the ecological disaster that Blackwood City had become. But none of that happened. Instead, within a few months of the commencement of Paragon's revitalization effort, another outbreak of the Pandora virus struck the few remaining residents of the city, prompting the company to close its Blackwood facility for good. And the government contracts paid in advance? Critics call foul.
I resent the implication that we would deliberately do something like... Look, we had no way to know that our activities would reactivate the virus. But we planned for the unexpected. We were much more cautious the second time around, as was required by federal law. Our fail-safe systems eliminated the second outbreak almost immediately. We've moved on to other endeavors. I mean, like the rest of the world, we just want to put the Pandora virus behind us.
Today, Blackwood City sits empty, abandoned. Paragon Industries has left this isolated world to its own devices, and nobody knows what, if anything, remains inside. Maybe we don't want to know. A land of chaos and tragedy, a place of violence and bombings and the darkest elements of the human condition. A place best left undisturbed.